We can do that, make sounds like your brain, revving up. Hello. If you recall, we were talking about how an individual might pursue some private interest that might in some way be similar to life's interest and yet not become, such as charitable efforts is what we were speaking of, helping the watch list was the last example, but how someone might be able to do that without getting unprofitably entangled with similar areas in which life might be pursuing interest of its own. And we were specifically saying that if someone was attempting to do something that bore, just even verbally, a striking similarity, such as life has all sorts of people, just all over the planet throughout history. Here we go. That's throughout history. Well, if I feel, I'll do it again later if I can get life has an interest in people being charitable. We're not going into the wheres, whys, religious aspects, but you notice throughout history there have been large numbers of people speaking out in favor of charity, very few speaking out against it. So life has, without any doubt, its own widespread general interest in charitable activities. And we have individuals, who might find themselves apparently interested in such as this, that simultaneously seem to have an interest in doing charitable efforts, helping their fellow man. And last time we were talking, specifically pointing out that if someone was attempting to in some way pursue their own interest insofar as might be possible in a way that was not completely, I said unprofitably, but was not entangled with life's general, such as getting all involved, as is very common, as would be, how about natural? This is not the same as throughout history. This means natural. As would be natural, that you can try to do charitable works if you're doing it for life and find yourself being somewhat less than charitable. As you recall, such as you're helping these poor people without watches week after week until one of them says, could you bring it to us maybe with a few diamonds on the, some of my favorite numbers there, and you feel less than charitable. If you were attempting, which would show that you were, for no reason that we are here to sit in judgment of, it would show that you are, as opposed to some personal private interest you may have, you are pursuing life's interest, because there's nothing wrong in life's interest in trying to do charitable works and end up killing the people. It has great precedence. Look at all the major religions. We're here to help you. We are your friends. Do right or we'll kill you. Do not ask for watches and go. It has great precedent. That's just the way life works because of, here we go, three-dimensional reality being run by polarized ice cubes. Energy. So we were pointing out where we left that if someone was attempting to in some way separate themselves insofar as possible and might be profitable and interesting to their own activities, if they were going to pursue something that had a striking similarity to life's general interest, such as doing charitable work, then such a person should be acting and not thinking about it, and they should be doing it and not talking about it. And also pointing out that if indeed, if you need a clue, if you need something to think about, if you need something to chill your drinks, you could think about this. That if whatever activity you seem to be doing, charitable works or otherwise, if all you do is think, well, if primarily what you do, how about that, is think and worry about it as opposed to actually going ahead and doing something, then what it results in, inevitably, is that you worry about the activity. Now, you may still do a little bit, or you may do a lot. It's not the point. But what you end up doing is something in addition to, if not in spite of, or if not to replace, but at least in addition to whatever you're trying to do, you worry about it. And I mean worry in a big old huge quotation mark framework. Everything that you can think of about worry. Fret, bitch, complain, whine, question, doubt, fear, all the good human emotions. That you end up, that at least in part, if not in toto, instead of actually pursuing some, effort in this interest. Let's take charitable work again. If all you do is think and talk, then it results in worry about it, concern about it. And if you recall, it has been suggested that worry is not a fit hobby for a revolutionist. In no wise. I don't care what it is. If it's worry over health, worry over death, worry over taxes. Worry is simply not a fit hobby. It is quite natural, quite normal, and there's nothing to talk about. Because everybody's got reasons to worry. I mean, if you've got a history, if you've got a childhood, if you've got a background, if you've had some years, if you did not suddenly spring forth from the head of either the Michelin Man or Medusa just before you got here, then, if you've got some history, then of course you've got some basis for worry. So I know it's natural. Excuse me. But it is not a fit hobby. Now that we're up to speed again, would you care to consider? While we were talking, one comes to mind, a certain area. See if you can push this together, since so many people seem to enjoy, those of you that finally either flunked out or wised up and discontinued your activities in law school. Right here, there is a very interesting legal doctrine, a theory known as the attractive nuisance, and colloquially known as the turntable doctrine, for those of you that like to figure that out, and it's got nothing to do with stereo equipment. But an attractive nuisance is like, well, it's a thing, a machine, or in the law, an instrumentality, an agency that in some way is so attractive to those of tender years, chillins, that is so attractive that you can be held responsible civilly for injuries. You can just be held liable civilly for outcomes from having these kind of attractive nuisances on your property, which under other conditions such a civil liability would not stand. And to make this real clear right quick, if you went and bought some property, 1,000 acres, and you couldn't even walk it all, and it turns out that some kids continue to walk through the end of the property, and you went over there, or it turns out that there is a old combine that somebody left there 50 years ago, just pieces of it, and rusted and grown over, and the kids that go through there, go over there and they play on it. And if one of them falls and gets hurt, it is known as an attractive nuisance. Now, if it was adults, they would not hold you responsible. I mean, there is no civil liability. To begin with, they're trespassing on your property. And I'm not going to get into other fine points, but in general, if someone trespasses on your property and hurts themselves, just generally speaking, it's their fault. That you're not civilly liable for it. This is even, you didn't even know about it. You are not responsible. You didn't put it there. It is serving no purpose. They got no business being there. But it becomes, it's what the doctrine, the point of it was to help protect those who are too young to protect themselves, that once it becomes knowledge, more or less, that you can then be held responsible under conditions that would not otherwise apply. It's an attractive nuisance. They shouldn't be there playing on it. It's serving no purpose. You don't want it. You didn't know it was there. You didn't ask them to come there. And yet if they hurt themselves, it is known as an attractive nuisance that, well, they came there and they played around, and you should have known it. Or if you got any notice of it, you can be held liable. Believe it or not, the connection that struck me that I was going to suggest to you, could you see that in some way how this might be pertinent to how life normally attracts, pulls people into thinking its thoughts, worrying its worries, doing that which helps pursue its own ends. Is a lot, in a certain secondary way, is not life. Some of you followed that. Would it not be the ultimate attractive nuisance? I mean, it is almost impossible. And you can't really be warned about it. Well, perhaps a few people here and there can be, and I say warned in a figurative sense, because anyone else, if you tried to tell someone else If you were interested in this kind of stuff, whatever it is, and that you had some understanding of it, and you met somebody else that thought they were interested in this kind of stuff, whatever it is, and they began to try to talk to you, and then they began to say, well, I find this very interesting, and I see that it's directly connected to, and they name some religion, or they name some team sport that's played in the nude, or they name some obscene shoe size, and they say, well, I consider this in some way tied to it. What if you tried to say, may I suggest you, in all friendliness, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, might I suggest to you that this has actually, or may I suggest it would have less than profitable, promising potential for you to try and pursue such and such religion or some kind of philosophy or some kind of team sport played in the nude in the hot sun, and this. There is almost no warning of an attractive nuisance, because where else can the ordinary mind play? You could try to tell it, look, you got the whole wide world. Don't get involved with a particular religion. Don't get involved with some cult. Don't get involved with believing you know it all, that you've already heard enough. In other words, you're telling the kids, don't walk across that little path. I know it's worn back there. It's way back there at the end of the acreage. There's this old combine that's rusted and it's down there. Don't walk back there. Come on, you know how kids are. To have to push the allegory even further, which shouldn't be necessary. I mean, you're going to tell them don't walk back there? There's no warning. That is, there is no profitable way to tell the ordinary intelligence not to be attracted to that which is attractive. To tell ordinary intelligence, do not go lay down and stretch out in the hammock when, you know, Jesus, I'm hot as hell, I'm tired. Do not go get comfortable just to be comfortable. Right, yeah. Boy, I'm glad I tuned in this show. That really sets my life on course. It is, I suggest as always, there is a background to everything that goes on in the cities, and particularly things that have a certain longevity, which the attractive nuisance does. It has wide application, and it has specific application. But is it not a kind of attractive nuisance, now that you've heard the term, of life in general, of what life does, with not having to pick on any particular rusted combine? I'm not picking on any particular religion, any institution, any philosophy, but just the attractive nuisance being life attracting and pulling in everybody almost, to the point that you're going to think its thoughts for it, you're going to worry its worries for it. You are, all in all, you're going to help life pursue its interest. And you certainly can believe and say otherwise. Because a kid can say, you could say, you shouldn't be playing up there. You could, not only could you get hurt, but you're wasting your time. You should be home studying. You should be home, you know, watching Sesame Street. And the kid thinks, the kid can believe I'm doing what I enjoy. From any ordinary level, once life has pulled you in, which it does originally, once you are a victim of, once you are subject to the attractive nuisance, which everyone is, then you are going to very likely be helping life pursue its aims, no matter what you think. I guess that's enough for legal examples. There is a collateral matter that we've been talking around for the last several nights. You remember the equation that we draw sometimes, I plus not I equals everything. Look at it as being an equation. You can look at it as representing anybody's interest in life, anybody's activity. You can look at it as being the dance. But the equation that apparently is me and then everything that's not me, at least in the secondary world, and everything, but me and all the not me's. To put it all together, and it spells everything. There is a kind of way that a revolutionist, once you have some view of this, that to pursue any possible way to pursue your own private interest that might be separate, that might be unprofitably, or that might be profitably separated, at least partially, from life's similar interest, would be that the revolutionist should operationally assume that his interest in the matter, in the equation, in the dance, is always going to ultimately require that he contribute more intellectually than the everything side of the equation, which is the payoff side of the win-lose game, that his interest is going to ultimately require that he contribute more intellectually than even the everything side, the payoff side, would seem to justify. Did that get complicated enough? Well, I know it was doing the left-hand gesture. I see it. It strikes everybody. It gets the left-right brain dichotomy going in some of you people. And I mean, you look at me and I look at you and I think, what the hell is the right-left brain dichotomy? And we both go, I don't know. So you're dealing with a dance, an affair, an interest you have in life that we're not questioning. To pursue an interest, and if it's at the level, if there's any possibility that it's a level that it could be your private interest in some way, profitably becoming separate from life's general interest in a similar area, I'm suggesting that whatever this neural revolutionist would be, that you have got to operate, or you should operate, on the assumption. Must I add? Yes. Must I add? Yes. Genuinely impersonal, truly impartially. Just simply assume, no rancor, no feeling, just you accept it that you still got your hand, it's raining. Or you still got your hand and they tip you a quarter. That's just life. But just operate on the assumption that you will be ultimately required. But you got to accept it. It's not somebody else's fault. You just accept it, that you will be ultimately required to contribute more intellectually. Secondarily, you're going to have to contribute more intellectually to the dance, to the equation, than even the everything side, the payoff side, that you look at it. Yeah, that's where I want to go. That you're going to have to ultimately contribute more than even that seems to be worth. But what I'm suggesting to you, that is not an anomaly. There's no way else. Don't say, well, in that case, I wouldn't pursue such as that. I'm suggesting to you that they're all that way. If you're not going to be trapped into the attractive nuisance of helping life pursue its own aims under whatever beliefs that you have that you're doing your own. Because if you do not do this, may I give you, a semi-guarantee that you're going to finally be pissed about it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You'll finally be concerned over it. You will finally have some worry over the affair, over the dance, over the relationship. If you're ordinary, you would finally say, with Jesus, they done stepped on it again. You know what I mean. They done run over my toe again. No matter what I do, boy, everybody lets me down. Everybody steps on my toes. You can't depend on anybody, and But I go back and repeat one more time, if you're going to pursue it in a way that might, of course, all of this, there's a justice involved, because if you could take this attitude, then some of the dances you've been doing, some of the things you tried to pursue, especially if you were intended, felt like you had to make a gesture with your left hand, you might go, well, wait a minute. If you attempted to do it this way, there might be some things that you've done that you might not do anymore, as Guitar Slim used to say. Eddie Jones to you, taking notes. Doesn't matter when you're dead. Well, maybe it did to Eddie, but it might interfere with what you're doing. But back to the point, you just have to assume, if you're really trying to pursue, if you're trying to distinguish, if you're trying to just consider the matter about how much of what I am doing, how much in perhaps this particular area is really my interest as possibly separate from life's general interest. How much of me wanting to help the watch list might actually be somewhere wired up in me, as opposed to that there's a large movement. I'm not dealing with them, but I know there are whole groups of people. They're traveling out in caravans. They're getting together each day, and they're going out in trucks and trying to help the watch list. So I know life has an interest, and I know that I feel like I have one. So if a man was trying to distinguish, if he was trying to just learn something about it, then what I was pointing out was he would have to operate. He should operate on the assumption that whatever the payoff, and you would have to describe it to yourself. I'm not going to pick on it. If I do it, it may sound funny. And if you're ordinary, it might sound, there's almost no way not to sound ironic or cynical. But whatever you're feeling about, well, if I go out and help somebody, there's going to be some payoff to me. Forget all this stuff about, the angels will love me and all that. That may be true, but if you're still reasonable, if you can be religious and reasonable, then you think, well, my interest, there's going to be some payoff. That it's I plus not I equals everything. In this case, my dance for helping the watch list, the payoff is going to be, something I get out of it. I want them to get something too, but it's going to be a win-win game. If they get watches, I'll feel good. I'll know that I'm helping my fellow man, etc., etc. You have got to, figuratively speaking, if you're going to do it correctly, you've got to operationally assume that you will ultimately be required to pay more, to contribute more, dance faster, dance more, contribute more to the equation, which is ill-reasonable, impossible in a three-dimensional world. But you have got to contribute more to the equation without messing up the equation, which you can anyway. But you've got to simply assume I'm going to have to do more than the payoff is. You follow? In other words, whatever you're going to do in life, it's I plus not I equals the payoff. And so we assume it's 2 plus 2 equals 4. The revolutionist, once you see what I'm talking about, he understands, all right, 4 is it. I'm satisfied with 4, as if you had a choice, but I don't have anything else to do, so I'll do this. I seem to enjoy this. The payoff is 4. And the other people are going to contribute too. I mean, there's no doubt they're going to contribute too, so we're not questioning that. You're going to have to contribute more than 2 before it's over if you're a revolutionist. Which, of course, is impossible, because if you have to contribute more than 2, then the payoff is not 4. And I'm telling you it is. It doesn't change that. That's what I'm trying to say to you. You have got to operationally assume that you're going to be required to pay more than the payoff is. You've got to contribute more than it is. Well, all right, it's either that or worry about it. It's either that or you're going to be in the ordinary position that you're trying to help somebody and they say, well, could you bring us double the amount of watches next week? Whatever it is, I keep using that, but you surely get the example. And it's not just that those who are without watches are ungrateful. That's not it. We're talking about the flow of energy. We're not talking about people and psychological problems and ungrateful, smart aleck people. If you're going to keep a dance going, again, it's impossible. I tried to use math about 2 plus 2, the payoff is 4, and yet you've got to do more if they're going to do 2. If the not I part's 2, and we just accept that and it's established, sooner or later you're going to have to pay more than 2. But the payoff is still going to be 4. That's not going to change, in a sense. But you're going to have to do more than 2. If you don't, it's just going to be an ordinary payoff. And part of the payoff is you're going to worry. That is, you're not going to be satisfied. That even if you get what it seemed to be the 4, which is one of the old stories in life, well, I got what I thought I wanted with Jesus. A new Ferrari was nice for a week. Well, actually for about 3 weeks, until the first payment came due, and I looked down, $3,500 a month. Now I thought, boy, what a piece of junk. That's an old story. Now, I did so and so, but boy, I got the payoff, and that's just not what I thought. There's no trouble in life. There's nothing. That's ordinary people have to believe that. It is simply what I'm pointing out to you. That is part of the payoff in life. As everybody else, if you're ordinary, part of the payoff is worry. Remember, in the full sense of the term, bitching, whining, complaining. In other words, the payoff is never adequate. It's not supposed to be. So if you're going to pursue something that might offer any surcease from such a condition, I'm suggesting that you would have to operationally assume from the outset that you're going to be ultimately required to contribute more than the payoff, the everything side of the equation, would ever justify. But then again, there is this. What? Oh, there is this. That there never is any justification for a man's secondary interest. That didn't mean anything naughty. It was just dramatic effect. It doesn't cost any money to do things like that. There is no justification. There just is none, no matter what. Of course, ordinary people operate and believe otherwise on top of that, but I'm telling you for a fact. You know, we only got 50 minutes left, so we can skip all this suggest and may I. I'm just going to tell you. There is no justification for a man's secondary interest. That is part of the hobbies in life. That's part of everybody else's interest, is bitching and worrying about other people's interest. Like, how in the hell? I have tried to be broad-minded. I've been around. I've been outside the United States. You know, I've taken a cruise. Well, I took some French in high school. How can people spend money? How can people, they go in debt. I see them, they hold up the line in the post office trying to be a philanthropist or whatever it is. People collect stamps. I see these grown people and they'll go in there and I'm in a hurry. I'm trying to get to work and they're in there and they're going, well, let me see the one with all the ducks on it, or wait. And they're standing there. How can they justify that? They can't. There is no justification for a man's secondary interest. There are no justifications available, and none are required. It's only the ordinary that bitch about everybody else. Is, you know, how can everybody collect stamps? Now you know where that leads after that. Because if you're going to do that, then you got to defend your own. Which is, you know, if you got to do that, I don't know why you're listening to this anyway. There is no justification. The world is big enough, even the post office is big enough for everyone's hobbies. You're bitching about them collecting stamps and holding up the lines because you said you're late and had to get to work and pull that shit. I know better. You're not late to get to work. I know what you're doing. You're trying to get down the street as soon as it opens at that baseball card shop because you heard they got in a Pete Rose one from years ago when he had a decent haircut, and you wanted to get in there and get it before the price went up. No, you wanted to go in there and do something important. Get in there and collect baseball cards, a decent interest. Would anybody care to? I'm not going into it, but there's a Kyroot from several nights ago. Would any of you care to tie into it? That the Kyroot went like this. It said that there was once a reality that said to a few of its creatures, the reality, it said, you can talk about what you do or not. It makes no difference to me. Of course, there is a key word in there. Few. No, just because you heard that doesn't mean it's the end of it, but consider a reality once told a few of its creatures, because that is the word, a few of its creatures, which is not playing with the prevailing manifestations of whatever that reality was. It does not change the flow of that reality, but a reality once told a few of its creatures, comma, quotation marks, you guys can talk about what you do or not, you few. You can talk about it or not, it doesn't make any difference to me. Well, I was going to leave it to you, but how about this? Just off the record. You could say that, in other words, that nothing anyone, if you're one of the few, that nothing anyone's old, ordinary intellect could say could ever make any operational difference to any radical new thinking. How about that? Well, after all of this, could we try to wrap up some of this? Since I've been trying to wrap it up since the first night we started this particular. I wonder what the hell that means. Oh, I'm being silly. I know what it means. We're trying to stretch out. I just found out they said that the next commercial wasn't keyed up yet. Could any of you see, from based upon all of the last few nights, how the following might follow? still regarding what we've been talking about, how an individual and life might both be seen to their own separate interests without the two becoming unprofitably entangled. To bring up, well, let's start this way. How about some A, B's, and C's right quick? And I'm going to let you wrap it. Based upon all of this from the last 4, 5, 6 nights, could you see that A, you can have your cake and eat it too? That is, those who eat their cake can be pleased. Those who do not eat their cake can be pleased at their ability to conserve. And or B, those, remember we're still talking about that you can have your cake and eat it too, that those who eat their cake can regret it. And those who do not can pine over opportunities lost. You with me so far? Yes. C, and into this whole mix, you could drop a neurorevolutionist who might be able to eat his cake, keep his cake, forget about his cake, even give it away. But C and a half. In the midst of all this, he might care about the whole cake affair, or he might not. But in either case, it would be based upon, it would be suitable to his own private interest, which is the only way you can eat your cake, keep your cake, forget about your cake, give your cake away, and even leave it out in the rain. I was hoping I wasn't going to do that. But. All right. Well, let's press on. All right. From all of that, if you thought about the cake, could you see this to refer us back to a prior subversive kind of mapping? Could you see? I'll bring it back up since a lot of you got a lot out of it. Could you then see that not only is the world big enough for everybody, but that there is enough cake to go around? Because everyone brings their own cake. Huh? Because everyone is their own cake. Well, also beyond, I wanted to say all of the kind of examples I've used from trying to help the watchless, things that appeared to be a little more personal, a little more widespread into life's interest. Beyond all of this, I'm talking about someone's private interest, still someone who might be interested in such as this. Beyond any examples I have made up or could make up, and you're a revolutionist, still might have even, let's just say, for the sake of hand gesture, for the sake of emphasis, more personal, more private interest. Which is, we must say it, which is fine with me, it's fine with you, it's fine with life. But you could have, beyond anything we've mentioned, you could have all kinds of interests. Your interest could be in life that you wanted to have a secluded studio somewhere to go paint, to finally go out or to get down and work on the book, to finish the symphony, to collect the entire Monteverdi catalog on CDs. Or, of course, one could simply, as a very private interest, one could save up one's money so that you could go ahead and have those thighs on your warts moved up to your neck.